Hi everyone, Lisel Crowley here at the Cool Tool Studio. Today I'm going to show you how to use the wonderful new EZ960 Sterling silver clay to make these flowing earrings. And this clay is perfect for these earrings because it has such great finish strength. So you can see how delicate they are, but they're really, really strong. To make this project, we're going to need EZ960 Sterling silver clay and a clay hydrator. We're going to need the Ultra Clay Pick, which is my absolute favorite metal clay tool of all time. We need a coil roller, and you can select either the narrow or the wide, depending on your preference. Some tough cards, a cup of water and a brush, and some cool slip. Let's get started. So here's the first earring of the pair that I've already made. And I'm going to use this as a reference to make its match, its mate. So I'm going to be working with EZ960 Sterling, which I absolutely love. And I'm going to try and get the mate for this earring to be very close to this, going in the opposite direction. I'm not going to try for a perfect match, but I do want it to look like they go together. I want them to be roughly the same size and have roughly the same look to them. So I'm going to start with a pinch of clay. Then I'm going to start the coil with my fingers. I'm going to bring in my coil roller. I really use this roller for so many things. I would not live without it. This clay board is a wonderful surface to work on too, because it raises your work up a little bit closer to you. And it also, even if you're working on a surface that's not level, because it's on feet, it gives you a nice, perfectly level surface. And my studio at home has a very uneven surface, so it helps me a lot. I want my ends to be nicely tapered. And this, if I compare this coil to this one, you can see that it's quite a bit longer. And it's too much longer because I want the ends to be tapered. I'm going to actually trim that down now and then roll it just a little bit more so I have nice delicate ends. Okay, now I'm going to place it on a tough card. And this clay remains relatively flexible for a while, so I didn't have to wet it in order to transfer it. But now I'm going to lightly dampen it because as you bend the clay, it's better to have it be moist. That way you don't get any surface cracks. So this is the hanging loop for the earring on this side. So I want my hanging loop to go in the opposite direction for this earring. So that's what I'm going to start with. And I'm just going to loop the clay around. That broke off, but that's not a problem because I've got plenty to work with. I'll just re-moisten that. Sometimes it pays to moisten the clay and just sort of let that liquid soak in rather than just sit on the surface. And I think what happened was I just didn't let that sit in long enough. I'm also going to try to taper that a little by stroking it with the brush. And now I'll bring it around. And there's my hanging loop. And now I'm just going to make my undulating curves in the clay with the brush. I find the clay naturally has a very graceful flow to it. All you have to do is kind of coax it with the brush. You don't have to try to force it. And then I want to make I want the length to be similar. So I think I need to trim it off just a little more. And I want to taper it quite a bit. There we go. A needle tool and a brush can accomplish wonders when you're working with coils. I'm going to smooth that and make my little loop on the bottom. Sometimes the clay tends to fight you a little bit, but if you're gentle and coax it, it will do what you want. just like people. Okay, so I've got my loop at the top, my loop at the bottom. I've got my 3 curves. It's a little bit long. I can fix that by making more of a curve here. Now I'm going to lightly flatten this core piece of the earring. And before I do that, I'm going to spritz my coil roller with some cool slip. If the clay was not wet, I would not have to do this, but because I've moistened the clay, I don't want the clay to stick to the coil roller, so I've put some cool slip on it, and I'm just going to very lightly press. I'm not even going to use thickness guides, because I just want to lightly flatten it. I'm not trying to achieve a certain thickness. I just want it to be flat. Okay, so now I'm going to take another little pinch of clay, and for the side pieces, I don't need nearly as much clay as I had before. I can use the same coil roller I just lubricated, but I have to make sure I use the unlubricated side. Okay, so I've got a nice slender coil here to be a side embellishment. I'm going to lay that down. And I'm going to just attach it using the brush. And I kind of like to, sometimes I just let the clay sort of tell me where it wants to go. And sometimes I'll, push it around a little. But I do find that the clay does have a natural elegance to it. The curves it makes are elegant and flowing. I am going to trim where it connects up here so it's more tapered. There we go. And I'm also going to shorten it here, shorten and trim it at the same time. I just want this to have a little more flow to it. Okay, let's go with that. And now I'm going to make this piece at the top bothers me. Maybe I'll keep it like that. Sometimes a slight adjustment can make a big difference. So I'm going to take another little pinch of clay, and this will be for the other side. Again, I'm starting it with my hand and finishing it with the coil roller. Nice and tapered and slender. Just lay it down on the tough card and moisten it. And this one, I'm just going to make a very simple tapered coil that attaches. Okay, so, whoops. I mean, they're very different, but they're also, you can tell that they go together. I can bring that in a little closer so it doesn't stick out as much, and that'll make it look a little bit more like the other one. And I also can trim this off up here. Again, I'm not looking for a perfect match, but I do want them to look like they belong together. You could also make completely different looks for each side too, and make it a very asymmetrical pair of earrings. There's no rules. It's just for this particular pair, I want there to be the look of a pair that go together. And now I'm just going to add the embellishment of the little balls, and I think that also will help tie it together. That's why I left this clay, these little bits of clay out, because I was going to use them. I'm going to use them to make my little balls of clay. So first I'm going to roll that into one ball, and then I'll trim it down into 3. So I've got 3 balls for one side. And it takes an amazingly small amount of clay to make these little embellishments, but they can add I think they add quite a bit to a piece. So I'm going to get those placed, and then I'll need another little pinch of clay to do the embellishments on the other side. Some people like to have a bunch of balls pre-made and stored like in a container or something and just pull them out. But I prefer to make them to order, so to speak, just because I know exactly what size I want, and it becomes part of the, for me it's almost like a meditative process of putting a piece together. One thing I find that some people students in my classes, and sometimes people who watch my videos, sometimes I feel like they make their balls a little either too uniform in size or a little too large for the piece. So be cognizant of that when you're making a piece, that the proportions work with what you're doing. If you are making a delicate piece, then keep the balls that you use delicate. Don't make them too big. It can really just throw off the proportions of a piece if the balls are too large. That one is trying to run away. Okay. Now the final thing I'll do is I have a little dish here with just a little cool slip in it. I'm going to lube my finger and very gently press where I've attached the balls. And that's just to make sure I have good contact between the embellishments and the coils. Now this will go in the dehydrator, and I will then brush the back of it with water to reinforce all the connections. I will dry it again, and then we'll sand it, and then they'll be fired and they'll be ready to turn into earrings. The one thing I will say is I always use a dehydrator because I have one and it speeds up the process, but they can certainly be air dried. It will just take a little bit longer. So here's the earring that's been drying in the dehydrator for about, I don't know, 15-20 minutes. And I know it's safe to handle because it slides easily on the tough card. If you look at the back, you can see that there's kind of a skin that's created from moistening the coils. The next step is to take a damp brush and to just brush that skin, sort of, you're not really brushing it away, you're sort of brushing the skin back into the clay. And I especially like to focus in areas where the clay connects, because that skin will almost make like a little bit of paste in there to help make the connection nice and strong. So I'm doing 2 things at this step. I'm smoothing away the skin, which is kind of rough looking, but I'm also reinforcing the places where the coils and the balls connect. And this will go back in the dehydrator. This will probably only need about 5 minutes to dry, and then I can sand it and it'll be ready to fire. Okay, so the final step before firing is to do a final sanding, and I like to just very gently sand around the edges, a little light sanding over the front, and a little light sanding over the back. And it really does not need a lot of sanding because of the way it's constructed. It doesn't have a lot of imperfections that need to be sanded away. And once I have it completely sanded, I'll brush it with a dusting brush, and then both earrings are ready to fire, and then they'll be post-firing finished. They'll be brushed, polished, and patinaed. So here's the finished earrings, and you can see how great they looked. I did polish and patina them, but you can opt to not patina them and they'll look beautiful that way as well. I've attached some ear wires. And I just want to also show you that the basic same design can be fired and wrapped around a mandrel, and you have a beautiful adjustable ring. Enjoy.
Visit our Learning Center at cooltools.us for more cool jewelry making videos. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and be sure to sign up for our email list to be the first to hear about new videos, new products, and other cool stuff from Cool Tools.